From 1968 until his final arrest in 1979, one man would lure his victims before beating, raping, and strangling them until they lost consciousness. Then he'd wait for them to revive, only to do it all over again before finally committing murder. It will take decades before he is brought to justice, and many believe for the 12 solved murders attributed to him, there are over 100 others that remain in cold case files. He was charming, he was smart and smooth, so much so that in the middle of his murderous spree, he was a contestant on the dating game, and he won. This is the story of Rodney James Alcala, the dating game killer. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Pottorff. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome to the inaugural podcast of Hitched to Homicide.
Yeah, welcome.
If you're new here, or if you've been a fan of Kentucky Fried Homicide in the past, we're so glad you're here. We're going to have family and friends on the show on a regular basis to mix things up a little bit.
When you get tired of me, she'll kick me out of the booth and put somebody else in his chair.
I would never be. You're the butter to my biscuit, honey. I would never get tired of you. But I promise you're always going to still hear a true crime homicide story from me right here in Kentucky in RP Music Studios. We've got Scotty, our
amazing mascot.
The amazing Hitched to Homicide mascot.
Or as all my friends know him as the Little Man.
The Little Man. He is our rescue Yorkie. He's 2 years old. And we've already told our kids that
they're out of the will.
He's our favorite child, yeah. But I do want to tell people a little bit about you, my better half. My husband, Rob, has done the music for all of the Kentucky Fried Homicide episodes. He'll do the music for this. You know the joke about how I wish my life had background music so I would always know what's going on?
Yeah.
So now we have it. We're always going to know what's going on. But, we've been putting a lot together for this, been busier than a moth in a mitten. But wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe, to like and rate and review the podcast, because the more the merrier. We'd love to have you. And I thought, since this is the dating game episode, that we might tell everybody a little bit about us.
Do you know the dating game theme?
Na. Is that right?
That's it.
Are you serious? Did I get it right? Oh my gosh. I feel like I need a gold star now.
Yeah, I know.
Is that really it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. But I just thought that since it was about a guy who was a killer who was on the dating game, because you and I met on a blind date, I thought we might tell people a little bit about that. Rob is a brain tumor survivor.
And I still have rocks in my head.
He still has rocks in his head. I was a widow with 2 kids, tweens, I would say.
Yep.
I had said that I would never get married again.
And I swore I'd never walk down that plank again.
And he said he would never get married again. And then...
Well, your best friend, my great friend from here in Lexington, I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, called me up and asked me if I wanted to go to the Kentucky Derby. And
she was giving away my ticket to the Kentucky Derby. We tell everybody that we met by a nose because our friends, Sharon Betts and her husband Gordy, her dad had a horse that won the Bluegrass Stakes here in Lexington, which is at Keeneland Racetrack, and the winner of the Bluegrass Stakes automatically goes to Kentucky Derby. And the horse's name was Dominican, and there's a long story that goes along with this, but this horse won in a photo finish by a nose, and because of that, I was able to get tickets with friends for a box for the Kentucky Derby, and I didn't have a date, and Rob ended up being my date via our good friend Julie. Yeah. Thank you, Julie. We love you.
Yep.
And he showed up on my doorstep with flowers, and
when she opened the door, I don't remember the next 2 minutes of my life, and I was done.
This is how you win brownie points, guys. There it is, right there.
Yep.
There it is. But that's our love story, and we have 2 kids, great kids. They're going to be on the podcast a little bit, but we're going to have other married friends and non-married friends on the podcast. But we're just excited that you're here, and we're excited to start this whole journey with everybody.
These shenanigans.
Yeah, well, and Rob is a funny guy, so
just ask me.
Just strap it on for that. But today's story is about a guy who has been dubbed the dating game killer. But in all honesty, being on the dating game is like a tiny part of this tragic story of this guy. But there's a lot here. And before I get into it, I just want to remind everybody, we used to have a group called the Kentucky Fried Cousins. But for Hitched to Homicide, we have the In-Laws and Outlaws. And go look us up on Facebook. You can decide whether you want to be an in-law or an outlaw, or an in-law who is an outlaw. But we'd love to have you come on in. We're already pretty strong, about 500 strong already, I think. So get on in there, and we always add extra stuff.
Yeah.
In the group.
And thank you to the faithful that have migrated over.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Appreciate that.
Much. Okay. There's a lot going on. Let's just get into it. First, I want to thank some sources. CBS News 48 Hours, Murderpedia, Hollywood Magazine, People Magazine, the New York Daily News, the Seattle Times, the LA Times, the March 23rd, 1980 Daily Breeze went into the microfilm for this, and the March 31st, 2010 Ventura County Star. Here we go. Rodney Alcala is born on August 23rd, 1943 in San Antonio, Texas. His birth name is Rodrigo Jacques Alcala Becour.
Say that 10 times fast. Jeez.
Hello, I wrote in here. Hello, my name is Inoya Montoya. What is the guy's name in Princess Bride? You killed my father.
You killed my father.
Prepare to die. Yeah, him. That's what it sounded like to me. So Rodney's father and mother were Mexican Americans, Raul Alcala Bancor and Ama Marie Gutierrez. And in 1951, his father, Raul, will move the family, Rodney and his 2 sisters, Christine and Marie, and he does have a brother, but I couldn't find his name. But he moves the whole family back to Mexico. And then 3 years later, his father abandons the whole family when Rodney is 11, and his mom then takes the family back to America and raises them all in suburban Los Angeles.
God bless her.
When Rodney is 17, he enlists in the U.S. Army. It's 1961. He works as a clerk in the Army, but while assigned to Fort Campbell here in Kentucky, PFC Rodney Alcala went AWOL in June of 1963.
Did it say why he went AWOL?
Well, hang on. He goes AWOL. Here's what happens. He takes a routine weekend pass to Nashville, Tennessee. This is according to an Army report. And then after stealing a car and robbing another driver of their credit card, he flees to New York City.
Okay.
Then, one night after leaving a bar in New York, he was seen with a young lady walking down the street. He followed her a really short distance, and then he hit her in the head with a Coke bottle.
Oh.
But she was able to get away. And then from New York City, he travels to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where he's arrested and charged by the military justice authorities with being absent without leave. And while being transported with a military escort back to Fort Campbell, he escapes as they change trains in Atlanta, Georgia.
Good Lord.
He escaped and made it all the way back to his family's home in California. And this is something he's going to do a lot. He travels cross country. He's really good at being slippery and leaving one place and going to another.
So he basically just enlisted and then just...
He was there for 2.5, 3 years.
Okay.
Then he went AWOL.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But he just finds his way home from Atlanta, Georgia, all the way to California. That's a trek.
It's hard following this guy already.
Oh, just wait. So Rodney's mom and his sisters tell him to turn himself in. He's staying at home, and they're like, dude, just turn yourself in. And while he's staying at home, he exposes himself to his youngest sister, who, quote, who became hysterical, end quote. Private Alcala stated he did not know if he wanted to have sexual relations with her. This is all according to a military report.
This is his little sister?
This is his little sister. This is all this information came from a military report, the Army report.
Wow.
And experts with the Army Hospital in Fort Ord, California, determined that Rodney knew right from wrong, but that he was, quote, unsuitable for further military duty, end quote.
You think?
Yeah.
How many guys did it take to figure that out?
Yeah. He pleaded guilty to the charges and he paid a fine. His rank was reduced, but he was discharged honorably.
What?
And didn't have a blemish on his record.
Oh, jeez.
It's a first mistake in a long line of mistakes.
Man, I miss a parking ticket, and I've got a record for the next 8 years.
Yeah, and he's exposing himself to his little sister.
Oh, man.
So he's medically dismissed after what they deem at the time to be a nervous breakdown. That's what they call it, a nervous breakdown. But more accurately, the psychiatrist diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder, which is a deeply ingrained and rigid dysfunctional thought process that focuses on social irresponsibility with exploitive, delinquent, and criminal behavior with no remorse.
So basically, he's nuts.
He's knuckin' futz. And he has all of these qualities. Every single one that is listed by the psychiatrist. He has them all.
Wow.
Now, after he's discharged from the Army, he enrolls at UCLA, although I read in one source that he started at another smaller California school before transferring to UCLA. Regardless, he is at UCLA. He has claimed to others that he has a genius-level IQ. There are reports that say he has a genius-level IQ. I couldn't find anything to back it up, but he thinks he's a genius, which is usually a recipe for disaster.
Well, I think that I'm 7'2" and a center for Kentucky, but that doesn't make it so.
Doesn't make you a genius. He graduates. Yeah, what is it? Just because you put puppies in the oven doesn't make them biscuits. You ever heard that before?
Oh
exactly. Yeah, just because you want it doesn't make it happen.
Another reason I love my wife.
He graduates 4 years later from UCLA in 1968 with a fine arts degree, and then in that same year, his first known crime occurs.
Okay.
September 25th, 1968. 8-year-old little Tally Shapiro. She lives with her family in West Hollywood at the Chateau Marmont Hotel.
Okay.
And for those who don't know, the Chateau Marmont is a hotel on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood that is historically known for long and short-term residence for celebrities. It has 63 rooms, suites, cottages, and bungalows. And some of the people who've lived there are F. Scott Fitzgerald,
Nice.
Quentin Tarantino, Hunter S. Thompson, Greta Garbo, Robert De Niro, Keanu Reeves, Johnny Depp.
Wow.
Just the list just goes on. And I read an article where it explained how much it would cost to live there for a year.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a guess?
I'm guessing it's over $50.
$156,000 to live there for a year. Yeah.
Wow.
The hotel itself has been in tons of films and is the setting for lots of books, and it's been referred to in lots of songs, too. And it's also known as the hotel, most famously, where John Belushi died of a drug overdose in Bungalow Number 3 in 1982.
Oh, that's where I've heard that name
That's where
before.
you've heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the rules of the Chateau Marmont, no photography, no video, no internet posts.
Oh, wow.
They keep everybody who's staying there private.
Wow.
So pretty interesting. Which made me think, on our honeymoon, we stayed at a place called Villa d'Este on Lake Como in Italy. And when we walked in, because lots of celebrities stay there, we only stayed one night, but lots of celebrities stay there, and they were like, do you want publicity? That's what it was, didn't they say?
Yeah, we took a second mortgage out to stay there one night.
It was not that bad, but it was bad. But they said, do you want publicity? And we didn't understand what they were asking us. And they were like, do you care if people know that you're here? And I was like, I want everybody to know I'm here.
Yeah, they wanted to know if we wanted to change our names.
Yeah,
an alias.
Do you want to be under an alias?
Oh,
We were like, no, we want everyone
Yeah.
to know that we're staying here
No,
tonight.
actually, we just wanted people to call us anytime, any hour. Call us.
Yeah, exactly. But it's kind of that's what the Chateau Marmont is like. You could be a ghost there. No one would know it.
Nice.
So for whatever reason, in 1968, Tally Shapiro's parents and family are living at the Chateau Marmont. And Tally is in the second grade, and she's walking down Sunset Boulevard on her way to school. She's got on this cute little dress and little Mary Janes. She's got the little white anklet socks. It's 1968. I mean,
Sure.
She's just a little kid. And she's walking to school, and she's late. And a car pulls up beside her, and he tells her that he has a beautiful picture that he would like to show her. And she says no. Then he says, would you like a ride to school? And she says, I don't talk to strangers.
Good girl.
And then Rodney tells Tally, hey, it's okay. I know your parents.
Well, there's a red flag.
And Tally gets into the car. But a good Samaritan, there's this person who witnesses this whole interaction, and they think, this is hinky. This isn't right.
Definitely hinky.
And so he actually follows Rodney, who, of course, is not taking Tally to school, but to his apartment. And the man calls LAPD, and this one little thing, this one little act, his one little Good Samaritan act on his part is going to mean something for years to come.
Okay.
And not just for Tally, it's the butterfly effect, right? I mean, he did this one little thing, and it's just rippled. It's going to ripple through time.
Okay.
So here's the report that the police get. They've been given this information. It's a beige car with no tags, no plates, following a little girl who picked her up, and they have an address to this apartment. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that, right?
Let me think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the worst thing you would ever want to hear over the radio.
Yeah.
So when the police arrive at Rodney's apartment, it's Officer Chris Camacho who arrives first. And he knocks on the door, and he tells Rodney, open the door. And Rodney comes to the door, and he cracks it. And Officer Camacho has said that when he looked into Rodney's eyes, that it was the face of evil.
Whoa.
Rodney tells Camacho that he's been in the shower, which is why he has no clothes on, and that he needs to get dressed. And Camacho says, I'll give you 10 seconds to get your duds on because I'm coming in.
Good.
And when Rodney doesn't come back to the door, Officer Camacho kicks in the door, which actually slams Rodney in the face.
Nice.
But then somehow he recovers and he runs out the back door of this apartment. And what Officer Camacho finds in the apartment is little Tally. She's naked. She's bleeding profusely. She has a steel bar pushed up against her neck. She's lying on the kitchen floor. Her clothes are strewn everywhere. I've seen the crime scene photos. They're awful.
Wow.
There's a tremendous amount of blood on the floor, and she's not breathing. And Officer Camacho thinks, I'm too late. I'm too late. This little girl is dead.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, 8-year-old little Tally, she gasps for air. It's like out of nowhere.
Wow.
And she starts gagging, and suddenly catching up to Rodney, who's run out the back door, is not as important to him as saving little Tally's life.
Of course, yeah.
So Tally Shapiro is taken to the hospital. She was in a coma for 32 days.
Wow.
She'd been raped, beaten, and then strangled with a bar. And she's going to spend months in the hospital, and she even has to learn how to walk all over again.
Jeez. Okay.
So while the police tend to Tally that day, Rodney's fled the scene. But he's left his whole life, himself, everything is all around this apartment. And what police find is a lot of photography equipment and photographs of young girls. And they also find a photo ID. It's his student ID from UCLA.
Oh, wow.
Rodney Alcala. There's his name. They have his name.
Okay.
So police go to the university where one of Rodney's teachers says, Rodney did what? Like, not Rodney. Rodney wouldn't hurt a fly.
Okay, wait. So why does it seem that every neighbor of a criminal, they always say the same thing? He seemed like such a nice
He was
guy.
a normal guy. He was a nice guy.
Yeah.
Although we do have neighbors, and I have said to you, I think that guy probably has a body in his in his freezer, and that is no lie. When we walk the dog, I'm like, I don't know, I got a something, get a weird vibe. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. But when he's at UCLA, all his teachers are saying he's a good guy. And so LAPD keeps coming up empty-handed, even though they've got his name.
He's slippery.
Nobody can find him. Nobody can tell the police where he is. And they actually called him a snake charmer because they thought he was just so charming. Everybody that they talked to about Rodney, they're like, he's such a good guy, and he's so nice and handsome, and yeah.
What's amazing is a guy like this can just disappear.
Yeah. It's 1969, and Rodney goes on the FBI's most wanted list. They know his name.
Right.
They know what he looks like. So he goes on the FBI's most wanted list. Meanwhile, Rodney is on a cross-country trip.
Okay.
He drives from California to New York City. And what does he do? He applies and is accepted into NYU's film school.
Oh, gee.
He's got a new name, John Berger.
Okay.
So he's in the city, he's in film school, he's very popular, people really liked him, and he's on the FBI's most wanted list.
Wow. Not a list you want to be on.
No. And I also read in a couple of accounts that one of his professors at NYU was Roman Polanski.
Oh, really?
But I looked it up because, we know NYU.
Right.
We had a child who went to NYU.
Yep.
And there wasn't any information to corroborate that fact because they're pretty big on saying these have been our teachers, this has been, and maybe they just didn't want to be associated with Rodney or Polanski because neither one of them are good guys.
Right.
But I'm just going to say, this is just me, Don't come for me. Don't send me. Don't at me. I'm going to say it's an urban myth. Maybe he took one class from Roman Polanski.
Right.
Not to mention that Polanski was working on other projects. I mean, I really did a deep dive. I wanted to see if that was true.
Well, here's what I want to know. How do you afford to get into NYU?
I guess student loans.
Okay. All right. All I know is that I was down here in the studio and...
I know what you're going to say.
And all of a sudden, Chris walks down and I turn around and she just looks at me and I said, "What's wrong?" And she goes, "We just paid the last tuition
We made
check."
our last tuition payment for
and we
kids.
both danced
We
around
did a little
like we
jig.
were
It was
12
like, it's
years
over.
old.
It's over. It's true. It's true. If you have to pay for your kids to go through school, we feel your pain.
Absolutely.
And if your kid gets a scholarship, good for them. Our
Yeah.
kids got partial scholarships, but yeah.
Yeah. Painful.
It's painful.
Yeah.
But I think maybe Roman Polanski was a guest speaker one day, and then he just turned it into something bigger. But whatever.
Sure. Okay.
But if you're on the FBI's most wanted list for beating, raping, and nearly murdering an 8-year-old girl,
Yeah.
what do you do for money in the summer in between taking class at NYU Film School?
Oh, no.
In the summer of 1970, John Berger, because that's the name he uses now, takes a job at an arts and drama camp for girls in New Hampshire as a counselor.
Well, of course he does.
Yeah.
There
I
you
mean,
go.
it's like you're putting the predator.
Jeez.
Yeah, the fox is guarding the hen house.
Yeah. Scumbag.
The next summer, June 1971, Rodney strikes again. Cornelia Michael Crilley. She's age 23. She's a flight attendant who lives in New York City. She works for TWA. She's 5'4", blue eyes, auburn hair. Her family lives in Queens. She's one of 5 kids. She was a graduate of All Saints High School in Manhattan and a graduate of the Trans World Airlines Stewardess School in Kansas City. That's what they called them then, not
Okay.
flight attendants.
Right.
So it was called Stewardess School.
Right.
A year and a half later, Cornelia had been recently living with her boyfriend. His name was Leon. She was living with him temporarily while the apartment that she and 2 other flight attendants were waiting on to be available.
Okay.
She's beautiful, and I'll post pictures of her in the In-Laws and Outlaws group. But on Thursday, June 24th, Cornelia is finally moving into her new place on the Upper East Side. She's moving into 427 East 83rd Street. Now, Cornelia and her mom are super close. They chat many times a day. And she spoke with her mom around 3 o'clock that day, around 3 p.m. But when her mama tries to reach her later in the day, she gets nobody.
Okay.
And that worries her. So she calls Leon, where she had been living. And she's like, "Leon, something doesn't feel right." She's not answering the phone. Leon goes over to the new apartment. And when Cornelia doesn't answer the door, he gets worried, calls police. And by 8:30 p.m. that night, the police break a window into the apartment from the fire escape, and they discover Cornelia's body.
Oh, gee.
Rodney had torn her pants off her body and strangled her with her pantyhose, which were tightly knotted around her neck.
Wow.
Her blouse was off and jammed into her mouth to keep her quiet. She'd been beaten, raped, and strangled. And there are all kinds of abrasions and scratches that showed she'd put up a really strong fight. And there was also a bite mark on her breast. That's called foreshadowing.
There you go.
I got it in there.
Certain things will remain.
There are things that are always going to be there. So the police are saying, who would want to do this to Cornelia?
Yeah.
You know, they think maybe she hired somebody to help her move the heavy stuff into the apartment, and that person did this, but they really have no clues.
Right.
And remember, it's 1971. Forensic science was in its infancy. And also in New York City in 1971, there were about 2,000 murders a year.
What?
2,000 murders.
Wow. In New York City alone.
In New York City alone. And 40 years later, in 2021, the number of murders in New York City was, you want to take a guess?
It's over 50.
485.
Wow.
But 2,000 murders in the city, the police are pretty stretched to find killers, and they don't have any real leads, and the case goes cold, and it's going to stay that way for the next 40 years.
Wow.
The same summer, he goes back to New Hampshire. It's 1971, to the Arts and Drama Camp for Girls. 2 of the campers go to their local post office to mail off some stuff to their parents.
And tell them what they find, Bob.
And behind the counter at the post office, it's the FBI's 10 Most Wanted.
Hey, look, it's our counselor.
And that's exactly what they said on the poster. It's their camp counselor, John Berger.
He's famous.
John Berger, yeah. And these two are like, holy cow, that's Mr. Berger.
Oh, my gosh.
So these two get back to camp, and they report what they've seen to the dean of the arts camp, who I'm sure promptly had to go to pieces.
Right.
He lost his damn mind. I mean, who wants one of America's most wanted child rapists counseling girls at their summer arts camp? And I'm pretty sure they've kept this whole thing hush-hush because I couldn't for the life of me find the name of the camp.
Wow.
And I looked. And the dean who runs the camp calls the authorities and says, we got a situation here.
Yeah, you think?
And when police arrive, they discover that it is indeed Rodney Alcala, a.k.a. John Berger, and they arrest him in New Hampshire, take him into custody, and then the FBI reaches out to LAPD and says, hey, we got your dude. Come pick his sorry ass up. And the police are like, great, let's put this piece of crap behind bars.
Yeah.
But there's a problem.
What?
Tally Shapiro's whole family had moved out of the country.
Oh.
Her family was so unhinged by the ordeal that Rodney put little Tally through that they moved to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
Wow.
So without a main witness, prosecution has no choice but to offer Rodney a deal. Plead guilty to a lesser charge of child molestation, be put on the sex offender list, and register as a sex offender. And
because he's such an honest guy.
Yeah, and he takes the deal. Of course he takes the deal. But the judge sentences him to only 1 year to life, and he's paroled after 2 years and 10 months.
Jeez.
And in 1974, Rodney is again a free man.
Out there on the prowl.
He is. And he's going to have a parole violation right out of the gate in 1974. He sells weed to a 13-year-old girl. Her name is Julie J.
Good
That's her name on the
grief.
record. And we don't know her name because, obviously, she's a minor and her identity is protected.
Right.
But he goes back to jail from 1974 to 1977 for that conviction. And there are accounts that she'd also accepted a ride to school. There's not much to be found about Julie J.
Okay.
And there's not a whole lot to be found about this conviction, I'm sure because she's a minor.
Sure.
But he's paroled again after serving 2 years. Now, you would think a convicted child sex offender and drug dealer to minors would have trouble finding a job and starting a new life again.
No.
He has zero trouble finding a job and starting a new life in Los Angeles. And he's a registered sex offender. Wow. I do want to say, I urge everybody to go to the national database and have a look. It'll show you how close registered sex offenders actually live to you. If you have kids, even if you don't have kids. It's important to know where these people are hanging out.
Sure.
And I will put a link in the show notes, and I will put a link up in the In-Laws and Outlaws if you want to go check that out. But after his second release from prison in 1977, his parole officer allows this repeat offender and known flight risk, you even said it, to travel cross-country to New York City. 1 week after he makes it back to the Big Apple, July 15th, a young woman goes missing.
Back at it again.
Ellen Hover was 23 years old and the stepdaughter of Reuben Schwartz, a garment industry attorney who owned a Gramercy Park duplex and a 6-acre estate in Yorktown Heights, New York. Her biological father was Herman Hover, the former owner of Ciro's, which was a famous Hollywood nightclub.
Yeah.
So Ciro's was a nightclub on Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood. It opened in 1940. It was a very popular spot for celebrities. It was like the place to see and be seen. Marilyn Monroe, Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Sinatra, James Dean, Ike and Tina Turner. I mean, you get the idea. That's who it is.
Yeah, a lot of the photos that you see, like archive photos, some of those photos are taken at that club.
Yeah, and even JFK dined there.
Yeah.
And Ellen Hover's daddy, Herman, was best friends with Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., and they were, in fact, her godfathers.
Ain't that a kick in the head?
But I'm pumped.
See what I did there?
That's a good one. That was good.
Thank you.
Now, what makes this even more interesting is that in New York City in July of 1977, they had a blackout in the middle of a hot summer. It's July, New York City. If you've never been to New York in July and August, it smells like hot garbage.
Was that 1978?
1977.
Okay. Yeah. I remember that.
July 13th and 14th, there was no electricity in New York City. The only place that was not affected was Southern Queens.
Right.
And everybody else was just sweating, just stewing in the sweat.
And it smelled really good.
I'm sure it smelled great. But no electricity, no air conditioning, no nothing.
In New York City.
The next day, on July 15th, Ellen was gone. She was 23. She lived at 3rd and 44th in an apartment. Her friend, Richard Middlemark, was one of the last people to speak with her. He called her that morning around 8:30 a.m., and they'd made plans to go see a Broadway show that night. Ellen tells Richard in this phone conversation that she's going to have lunch at Bloomingdale's with a photographer and will be home around 4 p.m. Ellen was never heard from again. I also want to tell you that the New York Daily News from July 31st, 1977, stated that she never returned to her 3-room Midtown apartment, and they listed her rent $225 a month, which is $1,078 in today's money. But I looked up apartments at this location today, and for a studio, no bedrooms at all, it's $4,000.
Okay, I was going to say...
Oh, sorry, I should have let you...
No, that's all right. I was going to say $3,800, but...
$4,000.
Wow. That's such a deal. Yeah.
Inside her apartment, police find few clues, like she's just vanished as to where she might be, except for her calendar, which looked like the name John Berg was written on her wall calendar. And when police began questioning everyone who's been in contact with Ellen, a guy named Alan Cohen steps forward with some interesting information. On the afternoon of July 13th, there was a fire on Ellen's block, and she'd gone outside to watch the firemen put out the blaze. I mean, New York City firemen are pretty hot. Sorry. But there were all these photographers and television crews there, and Ellen was chatting with some of them when Alan, who was her date, arrived to pick her up, and they were going to go to Long Island Beach. And Alan told the police later that he saw her talking to a, quote, tall, thin, shabbily dressed man who wore his hair long and tied back in a ponytail, end quote. When Ellen got into Alan's car, he asked her who the, quote, freaky-looking guy was, and she said, oh, he's all right. He's a photographer.
Okay.
Ellen also told her friend and next-door neighbor, Bonnie Gordon, that she'd met a photographer at a New York State unemployment office where they had both gone to pick up checks. Ellen had worked as an electrolysis instructor but lost her job 2 months before. So now are there 2 photographers or are they one and the same? And to answer your question that you're probably already going to ask, which is if her dad's a successful nightclub owner and her stepdad owns parts of Gramercy Park, which is very exclusive,
right?
What's she doing in the unemployment line?
Right.
So here's the deal. She was very much making it on her own, forging her own path. She didn't expect her parents to do anything for her.
Good for her.
Yeah, exactly. To which I say, bravo. But after Ellen's disappearance, I have my quotes up, Rodney gets the heck fire out of New York City and he heads back to
California,
Los Angeles. He's crossing the country again.
Yeah.
And on his way, and while in Texas, Rodney meets 29-year-old Chris Ruth Thornton. Chris has told her family that she's going to Montana with her boyfriend and that she's pregnant. And they're going to pan for gold.
Okay.
And after that, Chris is never heard from again. And for a long time, the family thinks that her boyfriend, who had been kind of known to be abusive, might have had something to do with her disappearance.
Right.
But her younger sister, Kathy, is going to look for her sister, Chris, and look for clues to her disappearance for over 40 years.
Wow.
It's the spring of 1977, and Rodney takes a job with the L.A. Times.
What?
Takes a job with the L.A. Times as a typesetter.
Okay.
And he's doing wedding photography on the side.
Well, in between killings, he's building his resume, right?
Yeah, I mean, this guy.
Wow. Then,
in Washington State, July 9th, 1977, 13-year-old Antoinette Whitaker, she was known to her friends as Tony. Tony went to McClure Middle School in Seattle. She's a foster kid. She's a tough little girl who'd run away from home more than once because she would fight with her mom. And on the night of July 9th, 1977, she walks out the door of the foster home with a man with long, reddish-looking colored hair pulled back in a ponytail. She's never seen again. A week later, her body is found, fully clothed and propped up on her hands and knees in a vacant lot on 95th Street in Lake City. And Tony had been stabbed to death, but apparently there was no indication that she had been sexually assaulted. Now, Rodney is never going to be convicted of this particular murder, but there are plenty of people who think that he did indeed murder Tony.
Right.
So I did want to say her name.
Right.
You know, I'm big on...
Yep.
Saying these victims' names and talking about them.
They get forgotten about way too often.
They do. November 1977, 18-year-old Jill Barcomb is a senior at Oneida High School in New Haven, Connecticut. She has 4 sisters and 5 brothers. That's 10 kids. She was number 5. But Jill leaves high school in order to go to California. She's looking for a new life and to be on her own. She leaves her mom and dad, Maurice and Joyce, to find her own path. She's a tiny little thing, like around 90 pounds soaking wet.
Oh, wow.
She has long brown hair, big smile. As a teenager, she sang, she played the trumpet, she loved roller skating, and she loved to play disc jockey for her friends.
There
like
you go.
she would be the turntable girl.
She was like Bernadette Peters in The Jerk.
I'm not catching that reference, but somebody listening to the podcast does get that reference.
I'm not even going to say what it is. I want somebody to tell me.
Email Rob.
No, put it in the
In-laws and Outlaws.
In-laws and
group.
Outlaws. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, put it in there if you know what I'm talking about. Bernadette Peters, The Jerk, and why I referenced her when she was talking about what this girl did.
And when nobody does, I'm going to give you a hard time about it. And there you have.
I'm the king of obscure references.
There you go.
There you go.
Jill is in California about 3 weeks before she encounters Rodney Alcala. And then she is found on a dirt path near Mulholland Drive, just below the Hollywood sign, in a knee-to-chest position and naked from the waist down. She's been beaten. Her face has been smashed in. She's been sexually assaulted and strangled with the leg of her blue pants. She also had 3 bite marks on her right breast, according to LAPD and the county coroner's office. But police have no clue who the killer might be, although they are thinking that this is part of another murderous spree that's happening at the time, the Hillside Strangler. So he's really picked a good time. I mean, in New York City, it's Son of Sam is happening.
Right.
In California, it's the Hillside Strangler and the Golden Gate Killer. I mean, he's one of many. And the police are super stretched to figure out which murder goes with which serial killer. How sad is that?
I got to say, that was a scary time to live in California.
Yeah. But not long after Jill's body is found, the FBI brings in Rodney, and they question him about Ellen, the girl who went missing in New York City. But they have no evidence to keep him, and they let him go, and in turn, he gives them nothing, of course. The end of that year, December 16th, 1977, 27-year-old Georgia Marie Wixted is born, the middle child of 3 siblings. She's raised by her widowed mother. They live in Torrey, New York, and while her mom worked to provide for the family, Georgia and her brother took care of their youngest sister, Anne. And when she's a teenager, Georgia underwent surgery twice to remove tumors. And it's while she's in the hospital that she decides she wants to be a nurse. She's also another beautiful girl. He really does pick beautiful people. She's blonde. She had her whole life ahead of her. But when they find Georgia, her bruised and battered body, it's found on the floor of her Malibu studio apartment near her brass bed. She's naked. She'd been sexually assaulted before she was tortured, bludgeoned, and strangled. A hammer was found next to her body, and she is discovered after her coworkers become concerned because she didn't show up for her shift at the hospital.
Okay.
She's a nurse. And even though there's not a ton of evidence, there was one palm print found on her brass bed, but they couldn't identify a suspect, to which I have to say, why not? Because Rodney's been printed, right?
Right.
He's been on the FBI's most wanted list. He's been in prison.
Yeah.
So why couldn't they match that up? That bothered me a little bit when I read that.
Yeah, and once again, I mean, it's what year is this?
1977.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but still.
Yeah, I know, but listen, crime reference and cross-matching and
True.
none of that was really being done that
True.
well.
There is DNA at the scene. It is collected in 1977. It's not going to be important until 2003, 26 years later.
Wow.
October 1977, Pamela Jean Lamson. She's 19 years old and living in San Jose, California with her parents, Kenneth and Jean. She was a beautiful girl with a bubbly personality who aspired to be a model. She meets Rodney, who asks her to meet him at Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco because he wants to photograph her.
Right.
Her nude body is found on a trail nearby October 9th, 1977.
Wow.
February 17th, 1978, Seattle, Washington. 17-year-old Joyce Gaunt, daughter of Frank Gaunt, is found face down in a kneeling position around 9:30 a.m. in a restroom at Seward Park. She'd been beaten, sexually assaulted. Her head had a massive skull fracture. She had been strangled. But Joyce has an intellectual disability, and she was residing in a group home. She's last seen in downtown Seattle, where she was waiting for a bus around 4:30 on the afternoon of the 16th. Just before midnight, she calls into the group home and speaks with a counselor, and between then and the next morning, she was taken to the park and then beaten, raped, and strangled to death.
Wow.
And police have no leads, again. But this murder is similar to the murder of Toni Whitaker, the runaway, because she's found in a similar position, and they were both at-risk kids in the Pacific Northwest area.
Okay.
So he's into, like, posing these bodies after they're dead.
It seems like he's getting braver and braver
Of course
and more
he is.
reckless, and
Well, because he's even been brought in and questioned by the FBI, and then they let him go because he knows they don't have anything on him.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, back in New York City, it's June 1978. A skeleton is discovered in the North Tarrytown area, spread in the brush on the Rockefeller Estate in Westchester County. Nearby, a bra and underwear had been found. 2 rings, an ankle bracelet, and a hair barrette are nearby. The skeletal remains are found at the Hudson River about 13 miles north of the New York City line. And what was left of this body was under a pile of rocks near the Phelps Memorial Hospital grounds. She was identified by her dental records. It's Ellen. It's Ellen Hover.
Yeah.
Daughter to the nightclub owner, goddaughter to Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. Based on the autopsy, it was a homicide. Now, Rodney is brought in by authorities and interviewed by the Hillside Strangler Task Force.
Okay.
And the Hillside Strangler, or Stranglers, because it was actually 2 American serial killers who terrorized L.A. between October 77 and February 78. And this is the exact same time that Rodney's out raping, beating, strangling. And the fact that he's brought in to be questioned again. So I wrote in here, you have to ask yourself, they knew he was a bad guy.
Right.
But they're not really looking any deeper into him, because if they would, they would find some stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback, but still, I mean.
And I realized that, there are all these different murderers and serial killers at this time, and they were probably really overworked. But yeah. But after he's brought in and interviewed by the task force, Rodney, this is where he gets his name. Rodney is cast on the TV hit show, The Dating Game. And the show itself first aired on December 20th, 1965. It was the first Chuck Barris show.
Wow.
So do you know, there's only one Chuck Barris show that I actually remember was a Chuck Barris show.
It was The Gong Show.
The Gong Show. That was exactly it.
Yeah. He actually hosted it.
That's right. Remember the unknown comic? The guy with the paper bag on his head?
Yeah.
Sorry if you're a young person. You need to YouTube that. It was pretty funny.
You kids and your young shows that you don't remember anymore.
I don't even know who you are right now. But let me give you a few people who were actually on The Dating Game before they were famous. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Steve Martin, Paul Rubens.
Nice.
Who's that, honey?
That's.
I know you are, but what am I?
Oh, my God, that was the worst Pee Wee Herman ever.
Sorry. Best I could do on such short notice.
Tom Selleck,
Yeah.
and none other than Rodney.
Yeah.
There's a video. I will post it. But here's how The Dating Game worked if you're young and you don't get it. It involves one contestant asking questions to 3 potential dates who are hidden on the other side of a wall. They're out of view. And then using those answers to choose a date at the end of the questioning. And the background checks were not performed when Rodney auditioned to be a contestant.
Oh, Lord.
So the show's producers had absolutely no idea he had a violent criminal history.
I'm guessing as a TV producer, that's probably something you shouldn't overlook.
Yeah. So contestant coordinator Ellen Metzger thought Rodney was, quote, striking, end quote, at the time when he was cast. Her future husband, Mike, the show's executive producer, said, nah, babe,
Yeah.
This is bad. Here's a quote from Mike. Quote, in terms of putting him on as a contestant, I think on the form I wrote NW, which was my symbol for no way.
No.
Because I noticed that he had a very strange personality. Eventually, I said, all right, we'll put him on a show, but we've got to surround him with 2 guys that have personalities that are respectable, decent, and fun,
Yeah,
end quote.
Exactly.
So Rodney was given the position of Bachelor number 1. A guy named Jed Mills sat next to him as Bachelor number 2, and he has said in an ABC 2020 interview, quote, he was a little creepy. I noticed that right away. In the green room, he jumps in and says, quote, I always get my girl, end quote. Immediately, I did not like this guy.
Sign that guy up on the investigation team.
On September 13th, 1978, Rodney's episode airs. He is billed as a successful photographer. The Bachelorette is a drama teacher named Cheryl Bradshaw, which made me think of Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City.
Right.
But after a bunch of horrible answers, she picks him.
What?
And their date is tennis lessons, then outfits from a tennis shop, and a day at Magic Mountain, the amusement park.
Okay.
While on the show, Rodney made playful innuendos to the Bachelorette, Cheryl, and the show's producers say, of course, in hindsight, that his comments are scary.
Yeah, thank you.
But she does pick him. And the next day, she reconsiders this decision and she calls the producer, Ellen Metzger, and says, quote, I can't go out with this guy. There's a weird vibe that's coming off of him. He's very strange. I'm not comfortable. Is that going to be a problem? And the producers are like, nope, no problem at all. No problem.
We got you back.
Yeah. No, don't have to go. I mean, there's this whole bit about a banana. He's talking about a banana.
Oh, jeez.
It's weird. He's just weird. But you can see the whole thing. I will post it.
Okay.
Summer 1978, Charlotte Lamb was the fourth kid in a family of 8. She was born into a farming family in Ohio. Kin to you, probably. Distant relative to Rob, who is from Ohio.
I'm a Buckeye.
She had Yankee is what you are. She had long blonde hair, and everyone called her Shug. I had a friend who everybody called him Shug, like
Shug.
Short for sugar, Shug. Mm-hmm. She liked to paint, sing. She was a good seamstress, and she even made some of her own dresses and skirts. After high school, Charlotte followed a boyfriend to Los Angeles. She studied and became a legal secretary, and she lived in Santa Monica. In the summer of 1978, she's 32 years old. Her naked body is found June 24th, 1978, in the laundry room of a large apartment complex in El Segundo, California. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled with a shoelace. The apartment manager found her body lying face up with her hands behind her back.
Wow.
Again, the whole posing thing.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Jill Marie Parenteau, 21 years old. She's born in Glendale, California in 1957. In June of 1979, Jill is a computer program key punch operator.
Wow.
And in case you don't know what that is, key punch operators are the people who would punch holes in cards to store information, and then the punch cards were then fed into mechanical devices such as adding machines and tabulators that read the keyed information.
Yep.
Yeah, it was all connected to a computer, which converted the sequence of holes into digital information. This is crazy. This is almost like I feel like this is like cavemen chiseling.
That's pretty much it. In the computer,
in the computer age.
Yeah, and the computers are about the size of most people's houses at that time.
Well, yeah, and we had talked about that in Kentucky Fried Homicide before, how it would just take up a whole building.
Yeah.
But, for example, an early computer programmer would write a program by hand, then convert the program to a series of punched cards using the punch card machine.
Wow.
That is labor intensive, man. That's not like writing C++ or JavaScript or whatever.
Yeah, you won't find that in the App Store.
Yeah. But Jill was so excited about moving out on her own. She had long blonde hair, big smile. She was very smart, very funny. She could also be shy and reserved with those who didn't know her. Early in June of 1979, Jill and her friend, Catherine Franco, they go to a place called the Handlebar Saloon. It's a Pasadena bar that, unfortunately, Rodney liked to go to. And these two are at the Handlebar. They briefly meet a curly-haired man, long hair, named Rodney Alcala. They don't think much of it. He didn't make a big impression, and the two girls didn't give him much thought, although Jill apparently did have a dance with him that night. And on June 13th, Rodney Alcala breaks into her Burbank apartment by jimmying the window. She's found raped and strangled on the bedroom floor, propped up by pillows. Now, a rape test was done, but the evidence was not preserved. And detectives also found 2 types of blood at the crime scene. One type was hers, and the other had the characteristics that would eliminate 96% of the population, but did include Rodney.
Wow.
And detectives learned that Rodney was seen dancing with Jill at a local bar just days before she was killed, that he had been seen at the Handlebar Saloon with her. A few days later, it's June 20th, 1979. I mean, he's moving quickly now from June 13th, June 20th, a week later. Robin Christine Samsoe and her best friend, Bridget, they're both 12 years old. They're at the beach. They're at Huntington Beach near the pier.
Right.
Robin is supposed to answer phones at her dance school later that day, but first she and Bridget are at the beach. And let me tell you a little bit about Robin.
How old is she?
She's 12. She was born on December 13th, 1966 in Kenosha, Wisconsin. She was a 7th grader at Dwyer Middle School. And while Robin and Bridget are at the beach, a man walks up to them and asks, "Can I take your photo, girls?" And Robin says yes. And Bridget thought the guy was creepy. And while this is happening, a neighbor friend of theirs, her name was Jackie Young sees this transaction happening, and she walks over and says, "Girls,
Yeah.
are you all okay?"
Yeah.
And they say, "Yeah." And then the man, he was out of there.
Yep.
Yeeted on out. He was done. He was like, if there's another adult around, I need to be out of here. And Bridget will later say that this man honed in on them. And they left the beach to go home, and Robin was going to the ballet school. And Bridget gives Robin her bike. It's a boy's yellow 24-inch 10-speed, and it's a bike that's never going to be found. And she says, "Get on this bike, ride to the ballet school where you're headed, and don't stop." Robin never arrives at the dance school.
Wow.
Her family calls 911. So that same day, June 20th, 20-year-old Dana Crappa, a Lake Arrowhead firefighter with the U.S. Forest Service who is stationed in the Chantry Flats, is driving up Santa Anita Canyon Road when she sees a car parked in a turnout and a man, quote, forcefully steering, end quote, a young girl from the car toward the ravine.
Oh, no.
She thinks it's Hinky, but she doesn't stop.
Why?
She doesn't stop to find out what's going on.
Wow.
Then 5 days later, she goes back to that same area on June 25th just to check because she feels like something bad had happened.
Yeah.
And what does she find? She finds Robin's body, little Robin Samsoe's body. Her hands and feet have been removed from her body and part of her head. But Dana doesn't report it.
What?
Quote, "I ran back out to my car and I left. I went to my parents' house," end quote. And for 9 months, Dana refused to say what she'd seen in the mountains because she was terrified and she didn't want to relive the horror she felt at the same time.
Because it's all about her.
Well, I think she was scarred. I'm sure she was scarred by what she happened upon.
I get it, but well, first of all, you're going to have to live with the fact that you saw the crime about to be committed, and you ignored it, and then you went back and you see the crime that way.
Yes, but you don't report it.
Yeah.
But hold that thought,
Yeah.
because Dana's coming back. Okay.
Okay.
Then on July 3rd, a fire crew is doing routine fire maintenance near the Chantry Flat campgrounds when a fireman discovers what is left of little Robin Samsoe's body. She's been in the summer heat in the middle of nowhere. She was 40 miles from where she was last seen at the beach. The animals had scavenged her body, according to Sergeant Ron Jenkins of the Huntington Beach Police Department.
Sure.
Because they're coyotes. You've lived in California. I have not. But there's like mountain lions and coyotes and there's
Bears,
a lot.
oh my.
Yeah. So police keep questioning little Bridget, and she gives them a description of the man who took the photo because Bridget had gotten a good look at the face of the man who wanted to take pictures of them.
Right.
And she was able to work with a police sketch artist, and they came up with a composite of Rodney. And they send it out everywhere, all over Southern California. He's on the news. He's on the front page of newspapers, everything. And who sees it but Rodney's old parole officer who calls police and says, "Dude, this looks like a guy that used to be a part of my caseload, and you really need to take a look at him." And what is his name? Rodney Alcala.
Wow.
Now, even though Rodney has a girlfriend while all this is going on at this time, and she actually thinks he's the bee's knees. I mean, even though he's living at home with his mom in Monterey Park.
How old is he now?
He's 35.
And he's living with his mom.
He's living with Mama.
And she thinks he's the bee's knees.
No, his girlfriend thinks
That's what I mean.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She does think he's the bee's knees. I told you he's a snake charmer.
I just think they should question her for her sanity.
I've seen an interview with her. Maybe it was like on 48 Hours or whatever. And she does. I mean, she's like, he was charming. He was great. He was, I had no idea. Well, of course you had no idea. But yeah.
Wow.
But he's living in Monterey Park, which is a stone's throw from the mountains where little Robin's body was found.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where police find him. But before they do, Rodney drives back to Seattle, and he rents a storage locker under the name of somebody he had met in Seattle years before. He didn't use his own name. He used another name.
Okay.
And on July 24th, 1979, a little over a month after he murders little Robin Samsoe, they arrest him.
Okay.
He didn't have an alibi. No one would or could account for his whereabouts during the time that Robin would have been abducted and murdered, including the girlfriend who thought he was an extraordinary guy. He's charged with kidnapping and murder. Now, we already know that Rodney thinks himself a genius, right? And while he's in jail, one of his sisters comes in to visit him. And while she's there, he tells her, hey, I've got a storage unit in Seattle, in the Pacific Northwest. I've got this storage unit in Seattle. I need you to go clean it out. And of course, as everybody knows, and if you don't, you know it now, everything you say, all the conversations you have while you're in jail or prison, if you get mail, it's recorded, it's opened, it's seen.
Yep.
I don't know how many times we have to say that.
Yeah.
But he tells his sister, the cops don't know about this storage
because this
area.
guy's a genius.
Because he's a genius. Yeah. So when the police search Rodney's mom's house after he's arrested, they find a receipt for this storage place that he rented 9 days after Robin's body was found. So he had his collection of mementos and stuff. 9 days after her body's found, he's out of California up to Seattle putting this stuff away. He's not willing to get rid of it. He's not willing to part with it.
Right, these are his trophies.
But he's got to hide it.
Right.
Police go to the storage place and they find thousands and thousands of photos of women and young men and young teens. Some are sexually explicit, some aren't. But with all of them is this small little silk bag. And inside the bag, it's filled with earrings. And they show the earrings to Robin Samsoe's mother, Mary Ann, and she identifies these little gold studs as belonging to her daughter, Robin.
Right.
And among the photos, well, there are none of Robin, but they do find photos of a girl in a bikini, roller skating on the boardwalk. It's Sunset Beach, a place that the Huntington Beach Police is very familiar with. And Rodney has told police that he hadn't been to Huntington Beach or in that area in years. But they can look at these photos and they know that that's not true.
Busted.
So police released this one photo to the press of the girl in the bikini on roller skates. And the girl in the photo, her name is Lori Wartz. She was a 15-year-old girl. Rodney had told Lori and her friend that he worked for a magazine and he was in a contest. And this 15-year-old girl thinks that's cool because the contest is whatever picture he takes, it could end up in a magazine. So he's taking pictures of her in a bikini in her roller skates.
Wow.
And the friend that was with Lori, her name is Patty. Well, the occasion was so memorable that this guy had wanted to take photographs of them for this magazine contest that she had written it down in her diary the day that it happened.
Oops.
June 20th, 1979,
Wow.
the same day that Robin Samsoe went missing.
Wow.
2 miles up the beach, that's where Rodney kidnaps Robin.
Wow.
So more teen girls come forward and they say, yeah, Rodney, the famous photographer, had tried to get them to take photos as well. And then after he would take the photos, he would try to get them into his car. And now all these people are starting to come forward saying what he was doing and saying to kids on the beach that day. And Robin's just this little 12-year-old who fell prey to him, like little Tally Shapiro, because she was late getting to where she needed to be, to school.
And you think about how many girls came that close to being a victim.
And how many girls were victims that are still cold case files.
Yeah, exactly.
February 1980, Rodney goes on trial for the murder of 12-year-old Robin Samsoe. And when the trial begins, Rodney's 35. His attorney, John Barrett, somehow successfully gets the judge, Philip Schwab, to suppress Rodney's statements to police concerning his whereabouts when little Robin Samsoe disappears, and even statements that he made to police about when he visited the Sierra Madre area after her disappearance, because the statements were made before the police had read Rodney his Miranda rights, and he had not waived his right to an attorney.
Oh, gee.
So just a
technicality,
right?
Yep.
What prosecution did get was the right to use statements that Rodney had made to 2 other jail inmates. There's that high IQ coming in again.
Yep.
Rodney bragged about the fact that he was lying next to Robin in the mountains and then sexually molested her before she was killed. He also carried on another conversation with his sister, and not just about getting his stuff out of the storage, but about possible alibis he could use.
Wow.
And prosecution, Deputy District Attorney Rich Farnell, is going to use all of it to make sure Rodney's consciousness of guilt is there.
What a scumbag.
Another interesting take by Rodney's attorney, he wants all the evidence on 2 other murderers in California who were still on the loose at the time that Robin Samsoe disappeared, Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Lewis Norris, who were the toolbox killers. And Kentucky Fried Homicide actually did a case on the toolbox killers.
Yeah, I remember that.
And these murders are committed in very similar ways to Robin's murder. And they wanted to pin Robin's murder on them. But the DA is like, they can think whatever they want to think and they can say whatever they want to say. But the similarities really aren't there, despite what this defense wants them to believe. Now, during this first trial, Robin's mother, Mary Ann, she brings into the courtroom with her a loaded gun.
Oops.
She has it in her purse. She never takes it out. But she wanted to kill Rodney for what he had done to her daughter. And I said, Mom, I mean, I get this.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the case where the dad waited by a bank of payphones and shot and killed Jeff Doucette, who had kidnapped and raped and molested his 11-year-old son, Jody. And by the way, the dad got a 7-year suspended sentence and 5 years probation, 300 hours of community service. He got 0 jail time.
Good for him.
But there's an interview with Robin's mom, Mary Ann, where she says that it was Robin who told her to take her hand off the gun, to not do anything, which I think is pretty powerful.
Right.
But after months of testimony, 50 witnesses, on April 30th, 9 men and 3 women convicted him of first-degree murder and kidnapping. On Friday, June 19th, 1980, Rodney is sentenced to die in the gas chamber for the murder of 12-year-old Robin Samsoe. And if you're keeping score at home, it was exactly 1 year almost to the day that he abducted and murdered Robin. And she is actually believed to be, at the very least, victim number 11.
Wow.
In 1984, Rodney's first conviction is overturned by the California Supreme Court.
What?
In a 5-1 decision, the court said that Rodney didn't get a fair trial because the jury had been improperly told about his previous sex crimes.
Wouldn't that kind of like...
Well, his previous crimes aren't supposed to have anything to do with this crime.
Okay.
Technicality, again. And there's going to be a lot of this, so just strap it on, because here we go.
Okay.
In 1986, Rodney goes back to court for the murder of Robin Samsoe all over again. Robin's mother and family, they have to listen to testimony from this piece of shit and the police officers and firemen on how he beat her, how he raped her, how he strangled her, how he removed her hands and feet, part of her head, leaves her in the foothills of Southern California.
Wow.
Again, he's found guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping and sentenced once again to the gas chamber.
Right.
And the judge, his name is Judge Donald McCartan, in the second conviction and sentencing said that Rodney was, quote, as guilty as anybody who has ever come through this courtroom, end quote.
Good for him.
In 1994, Rodney pens a book titled You the Jury. I'm rolling my eyes so hard right now. And I looked for this piece and it's nowhere to be found, so thank God for small favors. But 15 years after Rodney's second conviction, he's back again because the second conviction is overturned by the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. And U.S. Judge Stephen Wilson of L.A. ruled that Judge McCartan, quote, precluded the defense from developing and pre-sentencing evidence material to significant issues in the case, end quote.
Which means what?
I have no idea.
Wow.
I mean, it's just...
a lot of legalese.
Yeah, the defense didn't get to develop and present evidence material that was significant. That's what they're saying it is.
Well, whose fault is that?
So 15 years after the second conviction, the judge has retired. The DA who put Rodney behind bars has also retired. But for Robin Samsoe's family, the appeals were always looming in the background because Rodney is an asshole.
Right.
He's just going to keep working the legal system.
Sure.
But here's a problem for the prosecution on the third trial. It's been 22 years since little Robin was murdered. 22 years later, and they're still trying to put him away. The witnesses have scattered to the wind. And what will happen is that Rodney will be there, but if witnesses from the first 2 trials are not there, what the jury gets is a transcript and not a live person.
Yeah.
And it's just not the same. Plus, the witnesses no longer have fresh memories, and there's more opportunity for the defense to poke holes in their testimony.
Right.
Especially Dana Crappa, who didn't come forward at first, and is the one person who can link Rodney to Robin on June 20th, 1979, in the hills.
Right.
And here's why Rodney's getting the third trial in the first place. When Dana testified in the first trial, Rodney is clear-cut a murderer. Then in the second trial, Rodney's attorney wants their expert witness, a psychologist named Ray William London, to testify that Dana's statements were induced. And I even read in one account that the defense was saying that Dana had been hypnotized, and that's how she remembered that it was Rodney that she had seen in the hills with Robin.
Okay.
He listened to all of these hours of tapes from Dana speaking to authorities, and he wants to go on the witness stand and poke holes in it in the trial. But the judge, Donald McCartan, this is in trial number 2, he bars Ray London, the psychologist, from testifying, and now that's the basis for the new trial. Okay, so there it is.
Wow. Okay.
And this federal judge rules that the state of California must grant Rodney a new trial within 120 days or free him from San Quentin.
Oh, man.
But during all these years while Rodney's rotting away in San Quentin, DNA evidence has come to the forefront. And when they got all of these photographs from his storage unit, there were pictures of all these women. So are these women alive? Are these women dead? And what they found was that they were able to link Rodney through DNA that was collected to 4 additional murders.
Oh, wow.
Jill Barcomb, Georgia Wixted, Charlotte Lamb, and Jill Parenteau. And we've talked about all 4 of them.
Right.
And the LADA is taking him down for all of them.
There you go.
So trial number 3, this time, Rodney represents himself. Really? Really?
What's that saying? A man who represents himself has a fool for a client.
There he is. That's exactly it.
There you go.
But now it's 2010, and you know what? He puts Robin's mom on the stand. He questions her about bringing a gun into the courtroom during the first trial, something that she admitted to, right?
Yeah.
And you'd think that that would be the weirdest thing to happen in the courtroom on his third trial, because it doesn't really have anything to do with the murder of little Robin, the fact that she wanted to bring a gun into the courtroom. Here's the weirdest thing. Rodney, well, I don't even know. You all be the judge. Rodney actually questioned himself. He would ask himself questions in a deep voice and then reply in his own voice. Like there was just more than one person in his head. He's like performing this one-man play.
Well, I guess if you're going to go down in flames, baby.
I mean, he's doing all the voices. He's doing all the voices. But the prosecution has something this time that they didn't have before. Because after the rape, assault, and attempted murder of Tally Shapiro in 1968, remember her family moved away. Tally's back.
Uh-oh.
And she takes the stand during the penalty phase of the trial. Rodney throws himself at the mercy of the jurors. He also plays for his closing statement. Well, let me say, he showed everybody his videotape of him on the dating game. What that had to do with anything, I have no idea.
Well, he's just kind of like the high school quarterback, just reliving the glory days.
Yeah. His closing statement, he plays a Arlo Guthrie song.
The hits just keep on coming.
Alice's Restaurant, where the lyrics are, quote, "And I went up there, I said, shrink, I want to kill. I mean, I wanna kill. I wanna see blood and gore and guts and veins in my teeth, eat dead, burnt bodies. I mean, kill, 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 kill." End quote.
I'm guessing Hallmark doesn't have a card like that.
It comes as no surprise to anybody that he gets the gas chamber again. And he tells the jury that they are now all killers. To which I say, whatever, dude. I mean, it takes balls to torture, beat, rape, murder all these women, and then pass judgment on the jurors who tell him that he needs to die for his crimes.
I would have said, well, since you put it that way, let me think about this. Yeah, no, you're still going to die.
Right. Yeah. Then in 2011, New York City comes knocking on Rodney's door for the murder of Ellen Hover, because remember, she was the girl who lived in New York City. She was meeting the photographer. It was on her calendar.
Right. Her
body's found a year later on the Rockefeller property in Westchester. So remember, the police in California released all those photos that were found in Rodney's Seattle storage space. But there is not a photo of Ellen in his stash. But because John Burr, and he was known to be John Berger, was on her calendar, and because he fit the physical description that her friend, Cohen, who was picking her up, the guy who picked her up, that's the description he gave, they went to Rodney at San Quentin and said, "Yo, was this your work? Did you kill Ellen?" And he says she was alive when I left her.
Oh, jeez.
And the police are like, meaning you've been with her. And he admitted to being with her on the day that she disappeared, but he said he didn't know anything about her death or what had happened to her.
It was just a coincidence.
Well, here's another coincidence, because another girl comes forward and says that in 1977, Rodney enticed her to have her photo taken at the Rockefeller estate. He took her photograph 100 feet away from where Ellen's body was found.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. The guy's got huge coconuts.
Yeah. Also unsolved in the Big Apple, don't forget Cornelia Crilley. She's the TWA flight attendant who just moved into her new apartment. She had a bite mark on her chest.
Here we go.
And a handprint on her breast bed. Remember, I was like, why can't they match that handprint?
Right.
Well, they do, but it takes all these years. 2011, they're both a match. And Rodney is indicted for the murders of Ellen and Cornelia. And 2 years later, he pled guilty and was sentenced to 25 years to life for these murders. But they left him at San Quentin because, according to the New York prosecutors and the police department who'd handled the cold cases for these women for nearly 40 years, he was in a hellhole in San Quentin, and they're like, leave him there to rot.
Yeah, exactly.
The conditions are better in New York City, leave him there.
Yep.
But don't forget, he had all these cross-country trips, all these photographs of women, and there were some men. And in 2013, Kathy Thornton, little sister to Chris Thornton, who disappeared in 1982, her son is actually watching a 48 Hours episode, and the news program is showing photographs found in Rodney's storage unit as like a follow-up. And they give this link, and I'm going to give everybody the same link because you can go in and look at these.
Okay.
But her son goes to the website, and then he sends the link to his mom, and Kathy goes and looks, and she finds a photograph of her sister sitting on the back of a motorcycle.
Oh, jeez.
So she submits her DNA to the National Data Bank, hoping to get a hit. And it turned out that her sister was a Jane Doe body found in Wyoming.
Wow.
They called her Granger Greta because that's where her body was found, in Granger, Wyoming.
Wow.
And when Chris Thornton's body is found, she'd been there 5 to 6 years.
Jeez.
But her skull was intact, and they did try to ID her by recreating what they believed she looked like.
Right.
Her bones were found with clothing on them, and forensics knew that she was about 6 months pregnant. And remember, she had told her family before she left that she was indeed pregnant.
Yeah.
And the boys in Wyoming had saved skin tissue from the crime scene. And indeed, Kathy Thornton, who found her sister, who she'd been looking for 39 years, and the photos of Chris and Rodney's stash, and the location where her body was found is actually in a photo of Rodney's.
Wow.
Yards from where her remains were found, the DNA is a match.
There you go.
And when Wyoming police meet with Rodney in 2016, Wyoming police, after all of this comes out, after this 48 Hours program, he's kind of got dementia. He's still behind bars, high security.
How old is he now?
2016, he's 70, early 70s.
Okay.
But they show him a picture of Chris Thornton, and he taps on the photo and says, quote, "I know that area. That's my area." End quote.
Wow.
And they press him to admit to her murder, and he told them they were crazy and that when he left her, she was alive. Same thing. But he was, in fact, with her. Now, authorities on both coasts and even in states in between think that Rodney Alcala murdered not just the women and girls that we've talked about, but possibly 100 to 130 more.
Wow.
In 2010, Seattle police named Rodney a person of interest in the murder of Tony Whitaker and Joyce Gaunt. And in 2011, San Francisco investigators said that they were confident that Rodney was responsible for the 1977 murder of 19-year-old Pam Lamson.
Right.
He sat on death row awaiting execution for decades. And in 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom halted all executions by an executive order.
Okay.
But on July 24th, 2021, Rodney James Alcala died in prison. He was 77.
If I had sound effects right now, it would be a stadium of cheering people.
Yeah. I mean, just a horrible person.
Wow. Evil at its
best. Here's a little side note. Netflix has a film coming out. It's called Rodney and Cheryl. Anna Kendrick has been attached to the project to play Cheryl Bradshaw, the girl on the dating game who did not go on the date with Rodney.
Gotcha.
And the film only revolves around the story of him and her and the game show. Interesting. I didn't find a date when that was going to be released. It was like announced in 2021 last year, but with the pandemic and everything else, who knows what actually happened.
I mean, they've got to cover some of the murders and things. It just can't be her not wanting to date him because he's creepy.
Yeah.
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 That'll be interesting.
But as I said, I do have a link to all the photos and information, and I will post it in the show notes, and I will post it in the In-Laws and Outlaws group. You can go in and look at all these photographs that he took of these people. Some of them have come forward and said, that's me, I am alive.
Right.
But there are people in there that have no one has ever come forward.
Wow.
And you can have a chance to go in there and help the FBI if you know of anybody to attach him to whatever information you have.
Right.
But that is the story of the dating game killer, Rodney Alcala.
And say it.
That's all I have to say about that.
Yes.
Hey, Hitched to Homicide listeners. This is Chris Calvert. I love doing research and writing about real crimes, but I also love writing about fictional people who commit horrible atrocities. When you're ready to take a break from true crime for fictional crime, go to chriscalvert.com, where you'll find all my books, including some free ones to get you started. Jane Doe is one badass chick who quietly hunts terrorists in the United States. The Sex and Lies books are all FBI and CIA cases with a little romance on the side. And coming summer 2022, Book 10 in the series, Sex, Lies, and Rock and Roll, releases. You can find all of these books everywhere, and if you like to listen instead of read, you can find them all on Audible. So go grab a free book or take a listen. I love all the characters I've written. I've given them pain, ruined their lives, make them suffer, and maybe even throw in a heroic death. Or maybe they live to fight another day. Check it all out at chriscalvert.com, and thanks for being a listener of Hitched to Homicide. Now, we want to go back to always ending the podcast on a positive note.
Yes, after that heaviness, yes.
And so Rob is doing the honors today of the very first...
Well, bless your heart.
Bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
That's what they say in the South.
That's right.
Actually, I'm from Ohio originally, but my grandma Pottorf, used to say that a lot. Well, bless your heart.
Yeah. Bless your heart.
And she used to say that a lot to me, so I don't know what that means.
I don't know what to tell you about that, honey.
Whatever. Well, I got a good one for you. This is the first installment of the Well, Bless Your Heart. And this one is entitled, Is That a Crossbow in Your Pocket? Or Are You Just Happy to See Me? And it just kind of makes me want to cross my legs right now. Okay, so police in Florida say a man stole a crossbow from a store by shoving it down the front of his pants. Oh, man. Reports NBC News. More specifically, the Brevard County Sheriff's Office says one of the world's dumbest criminals, stole a 33-inch crossbow valued at $1,300 from a True Value store.
Oh, my gosh. Is that how expensive a crossbow is?
I guess.
Oh, my God. So hunters out there right now are going, come on, Chris. Of course it's expensive. Why else would he be shoving it down his pants?
Well, they're probably going, $1,300, that's nothing. That's
I wonder if it was loaded with an arrow. Okay, sorry, keep going.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I don't even want to think about that. He stuffed it down his tight, stretchy pants. To be fair, police say that the tack can't even get through this.
He needed the girth. He needed the space. Yeah. So the Lycra came in handy.
Oh, man. To be fair, police say the tactic actually worked, at least temporarily. The thief did, in fact, successfully leave the store, according to the sheriff's office. He used a single crutch in an apparent ruse to help disguise why he was walking funny. Store employees noticed the theft about 2 weeks later, checked the surveillance videos, and voila.
Wait, they're just like like, hold the phone. We're missing a $1,300 crossbow. I wonder if somebody shoved it down their pants and walked out the front door.
Yeah. Oh, he was just happy to see them. Police then arrested 46-year-old Darren Durant, who faces a charge of felony theft, according to the Sheriff Wayne Ivey. You just can't make this stuff up, wrote Sheriff Wayne. There's a video, and we'll post it in the In-Laws and Outlaws Facebook group. That's just...
that's a good one.
Well, it's just wrong on so many levels.
That's hilarious. That's good.
And I'm sure if there's any guys listening to this podcast right now, every one of us are going, oh, man.
I just want to know if there was an arrow in it. How big is a crossbow?
A crossbow? Well, my brother had a crossbow when I remember.
So it's
like
2 feet, 3 feet in diameter.
Yeah, but I guess they can fold up and you can put it, it would be.
Okay, well, we'll go to the video footage to see how he actually did that. So
yeah, that's just wrong on so many levels.
Well, just like the Mayberry crime, if you have, bless your heart, that you'd like to share with us, you can email us. You can email me at chris@hitchedtohomicide.com. I would love to hear your suggestions.
Yep.
Thanks again for joining us on the inaugural podcast of Hitched to Homicide. That's my hubby over there, Rob.
And that's my beautiful bride, Chris.
You're the butter to my biscuit, baby. See you next time on Hitched to Homicide. And remember, be kind to strangers, but don't get in their car.
And you can hear the growling. That's Scotty.
Scotty has made an appearance.
There you go. Bye, everybody.